Does it make any sound? Yeah, I want to make the sound up a little bit in case somebody dings in. But you never can tell. So, for those that didn't have the anatomy, it's probably worthwhile to do a quick review with regard to it. I'm not really going to do it, but I'm going to highlight the physiology. And if you're unfamiliar with the anatomy, the best thing I can tell you is I don't do teeth. There's nothing anatomical or physiological with teeth. I don't do teeth. You're in charge of teeth. So really, the whole idea when we get to the physiology is at the last PowerPoint, but I want to highlight some things as we work our way there that are impactful physiologically. So really, it's very simple. We ingest, we bring it in, we digest, we break it down to the material, to the smallest molecular units that we are capable of absorbing. So they have to be small enough that we can absorb. Absorb is actually taking it in to either the bloodstream or the lymph, and then we excrete whatever is basically the residue, what is undigested food, things that are not utilized, that are undigestible, a variety of waste products, cells, and water. Basically, that's what we rid ourselves of in that type of sense. And so, again, just anatomically speaking, it's just a hollow tube that goes through us, that twists and turns. It's about 30 feet long and somehow manages to fit, in basically 3.5 feet of length. And we twist and turn it all in there, as you might imagine. So a continuous muscular tube. I'm not going to go into the anatomy of the musculature. That was anatomy, all the layers, but I do think you need to be familiar with, and we'll talk a little bit about the role physiologically of these accessory structures in just a bit, but to understand without looking at the sort of classic diagram what goes on. And the key issue is peristalsis. This is the rhythmic contract, smooth muscle. We discussed at length the physiological aspects of smooth muscle, and basically what it does, it squeezes and it pushes. That's really what peristalsis is. It's rhythmic. It's brought on by a combination of stretch receptors, chemoreceptors, osmotic receptors, which are really a form of chemoreceptors, acid and base receptors. All of those are what allow this miraculous kind of, holding my towel, squeeze, push, squeeze, push. Rhythmic in nature, and in certain areas, we end up doing what's called segmentation. This is principally small and large intestine, you might recall. And what that is, it's more, in the small intestine, it's more about thoroughly doing it in such a way that's back and forth before we move it along. That's what segmentation is, to really permit thorough digestion and absorption. And then finally, the peristalsis will take it on its way to excretion. So the two are combined. But the small intestine probably is the highlight of segmentation, perhaps a little less so in the large intestine, also known as the colon. It's basically, I can tell you, there's good illustrations. This is the anatomical organization. We're not going to go into all the different peritoneal layers and retroperitoneal and things like that. The interesting point, what's unique about this visceral peritoneum is it's called a mesentery. It's really a couple of double-folded layers of connective tissue with fatty tissue involved, which sandwiches blood vessels, nerves, and it's so free that it allows it really enhances what's physiologically absolutely the most important part about digestion. You can move freely. And it's literally, when we say retroperitoneal, that's resorbed, and it's like a tethering point or an attachment point to the posterior wall of your abdominal pelvic cavity. And wherever those points are, typically for either stability or for some critical process that's going on. So you might remember I talked about that. If you'll see, I have it again. I have, and you may have seen it before, I have a pretty good size outline of the chapter that I put on Blackboard for you as well. And so that's what they talk about, this intra and retroperitoneal, without going crazy about it or clinically live. This is a sterile area, whether it's a ruptured appendix, a gunshot, a stab wound, some type of inadvertent pierce that occurs. I mean, all sorts of nasty things. Peritonitis is a major emergency, major surgical emergency. Those are the layers, of which there are four. And really, in a quick summary, I mean, you have an outer layer covers the smooth muscles. This is part of the rhythmic, circular, and longitudinal muscle. And then you have really this is the layer that's all about functionality. This is the layer where whether it's starch digestion and enhances absorption all the way throughout. It's so sophisticated. This submucosal layer is really the supportive structures, whether it's lymphatics, blood vessels, nerve supply. And remember, it all runs on its own. Physiologically, you don't have to worry about a nerve supply. It has its own. You don't have to, as you recall, have direct nervous intervention because there are nerves that are already embedded there. The sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves are just adjusters. Parasympathetic increases the degree of activity, sympathetic decreases. You might recall, for those who weren't here, you would recall, but the folks who were here might recall, I've had the vagus nerve twice severed, sectioned, removed sections of it from going to my stomach when they were treated all the ulcers I had, first in 1993 and then in 2000. The only reason I tell you that is because it means you, at that point, were not responsible. If I had them today, you might be implicated. It's a joke. The people who left, are they the ones that didn't show up? I mean, Jen is usually snapping. I'm not quite sure what everybody else is doing. Abby's having a good time. You guys are chatting in the back. That's all right. At least you're pleasant enough. This is terrible. But nevertheless, all of this is designed basically to this little muscular layer maximizes, sort of fits itself around the food. It's all geared with between lymphatics and basically immunological tissue to make sure that effectively you're running safety checks and everything is going in and allowing it be addressed. There's so much that goes on in all those, and it would do you well to be able to look that over. Not worried about the circulation. Again, the big side note, if you didn't recall it, the hepatic portal circulation is all of what we digest and then absorb, whether it's in the stomach and there's little, the small intestine where it's nearly all, and the large intestine, relatively speaking, a little. All of that material that goes into the bloodstream, and some of it does go into the lymph, to be fair. All of those materials that are absorbed directly into the bloodstream by those lacteals, and those villi, the lacteals, the lymphatic structure, the capillary bed around is what make up that villus that we see classically in the small intestine. To a lesser extent, you might see a few of those in the large intestine. All of that blood has to be taken to the liver first for processing, detoxification, processing it into appropriate things like proteins, fats, whatever is going to be there, breaking down carbohydrate chains. All of those, or rather reforming them in a lot of different ways. So there's a tremendous amount that goes on by way of that hepatic portal circulation. It's really neat that we basically have an arrangement so that everything we ingest, if it hasn't been detoxified by the time it gets into the system, is detoxified either a second time or for the first time in the liver. So the liver is critical. And again, I don't want to get into it. This is about we call it the gut brain, its own nervous system. So it doesn't require over control. We only either increasing it, and particularly in fight or flight, slowing it down. It's really more of a nervous system. It's an override, for lack of a better way to express it. Okay, we're busy doing something else. You don't have to work so much. We'll give you a little bit of blood flow just in case. But other than that, we need the blood going elsewhere. That's really what your brain is then in a automated fashion telling your gut about what's going on. I don't care about short and long reflexes or the stimuli or these various kinds of things that are there the different controls. Things that are important, we get to it in the mouth. The mouth is the first time where we start to see digestion, the true physiology. It is twofold. My kingdom. I'm not going to have a kingdom after this. I didn't bring my pen. My writing. But fear not. I may still have them. Or perhaps not. Oh well, life is like that. What are these pounds? Can only hope. So in the mouth, you have the start of, it works well. Two things. It's where we start fat digestion. It's called lingual lipase from the tongue. Lipase for fats. Starts to break them down. And the first time we begin to break down carbohydrates in the form of starches, salivary amylase. That's in the mouth. At that point, nothing else happens except it starts there. It is basically mechanical digestion in the mouth. Teeth, tongue, forming it, moisturizing it, facilitated by saliva, the natural moisturizers in the mouth. All of that's happening. When we swallow it in the esophagus, it really doesn't get processed. Once it gets to the stomach, we use the next wave of things that happen. Okay? The next time, you're going to see we end up with in the stomach, we have gastric lipase. So we continue to work on the fats a little bit. The stomach's just a giant bag for mixing. Remember, we talked about that. The ridges in the stomach, those rugae, basically passing like an old style washboard. In fact, over and back, over and back. Love it. Love it. Gastric lipase for that. And this is the first place we start protein digestion. First of what we call proteolytic, which means to break up enzymes found in the stomach, and that is we generate the mechanism that delivers pepsin, and we'll do a quick review of it. And all proteolytic enzymes are inactive. They are secreted from wherever they come from. These happen to come, the cells that they come from happen to be what are called chief cells, and we look at all of those. Generate something called pepsinogen. The way that we look at most enzymes, the generic or family name for them are called zymogens. So they're enzymes that are inactive. The ogen is the precursor type form. So what you'll see in the stomach, for instance, pepsinogen in the presence of hydrochloric acid secreted by the parietal cells, you might remember that. Again, convert that to the active form. So this is inactive ogen. This is the active. This is a consistent pattern you'll see with enzymes, and particularly proteolytic enzymes in the gut. If they were secreted in the active form, we would auto-digest. Effectively, if they leak out, I was talking about it this morning. Now, unfortunately, one of the real dreaded things that alcoholics get, and it's not just alcohol, it's called pancreatitis. Pancreas secretes tons of these enzymes, and they're in the inactive form. But what happens in pancreatitis, rather than going into the gut, okay, where pH basically activates them, principally alkaline pH, pancreatitis, then if the pancreas becomes so inflamed, they leak out the abdominal pelvic cavity. And then there's always eddies in pH going from, acidic to alkaline. They're going to get activated. But when they do, it's almost like you're eating yourself up from the inside. They're an enzyme digester. They're a protein digester. They're indiscriminate. It's not limited to, we'll only do collagen. We'll only do elastin. We'll only do albumin. No. If it's a protein, read. And What are we made of? We're made of proteins, structural proteins. So you're gobbled up from within. To wit, and maybe you recall me telling you this anecdote. First wife had a condition where she formed tumors, very famously neurofibromatosis, the elephant man disease, autosomal dominant for you genetics fans, you might recall. And she was taking an immunological agent for her psoriatic arthritis, basically an immunosuppressive agent. And what happened was she started a tumor about slightly smaller than a softball, deep. And she weighed 105 pounds soaking wet with all her clothes on. It was tiny. And was growing on the sort of on the posterior aspects of her pancreas and stomach area. Okay? So the surgeon had to remove it carefully, and what it triggered, almost unavoidably so, certainly not a surgical error, just the very fact of mechanically removing it, it created a post-operative pancreatitis. I have never, and drinking, no, I mean, between my first wife, my wife now, and I, we probably have, if we have consumed a bottle of liquor in those 40 plus years, it would be a lot. We don't drink. Deglazing with a little, I had a wonderful fried rice. Made a really good sauce with dry sherry. Substitute for Shaoxing rice wine, which is an instrument frequently found in Asian cuisine. But understand, I've never seen anybody that much pain. It was horrifying. She would just all of a sudden just double over as it would shoot out those enzymes. It was like it was eating her up on the inside, and nothing you really can do about it. It's going to take a certain amount of time. All you can do is push fluids, use pain medicine, and hope that it was about an additional week in the hospital. Oh my God. Unbelievable. Gives you an idea of how powerful the enzymes are. Again, all this lips, this is all anatomy, not doing it. Notice the teeth that are in there, we're not doing it. Hello, in there, not doing it. Taste buds, not doing it. Tonsils. We talked about all this stuff. Physiologically, saliva, you should remember, cleansing the mouth. Why do they keep calling me? Oh, thank God it's going to voicemail. No. It's our air conditioner, it's our HVAC people. Want to do a thing, servicing that we pay for. So all the things it does, saliva cleanses, dissolves because it's got enzymes in it itself, moistens the food. It's hypotonic, so it puts moisture into the cell physiologically, and this is the start of amylase. And most of it comes from the salivary gland, the vast majority from the parotid gland. Remember, parotid glands are basically serous, they're more watery. Submandibular glands are also watery. The sublingual are a little bit more mucousy, a little bit more proteinaceous. Oh God, you're killing me with these messages. So here they are. We went over that before. The anatomy, that's all. You get serous versus mucus, parotid, submandibular, serous, sublingual mucus. All you have to know about that. Dry mouth, don't worry about it. Sjogren syndrome, we're not going to talk about. There's a lot of things with medications have a lot of side effects, and it's not unusual to get a dry mouth. So that's something to be aware of. Depending on where you're going forward, you won't have to know any of this type of stuff that's there. I don't get too excited about all the salivary stuff like that. They're there. And we're not doing anything about the teeth. I love this because I don't have any more to do with this PowerPoint. If there's anything on there that I've skipped, I will look at the exam, which is the final. I'm starting to work on it now. I started to add, delete, and do all that sort of, pardon the expression, finalize the final I think I was either yesterday or maybe it was yesterday. And so as we move on, again, I'm just giving you the base sort of physiology that accompanies this little anatomical review. Nothing special here in the esophagus. Nothing special there with the anatomical landmarks. Again, physiologically, this again is that same beauty of fan folding. Sir.
When we do the presentations for lab,
yes.
Do you want us to just email you, or is there going to be like something we turn it into?
Just email me which day and remind me of the topic, which I have a tendency to forget. Sorry, I'm not that old yet, but I'm forgetting. My children take great pains at reminding me, Dad, you didn't forget. So they must think I'm this far away from walking around naked here. Okay, I'm not like that. And nobody could unsee that. But this is the kind of stuff that's expansile and it's structural, but it's physiological. The big thing here, the anatomy portion, it's physiological as well. The hallmark cells, and they're the most rapidly replaced cells in your entire body, simple columnar with goblet cells. And so sharp transitions you can see here from stratified squamous non-keratinizing in the esophagus. Now you begin to see in the stomach that transition occurs right there. Now you have simple columnar. And what you're seeing there, you might remember we talked about they are the gastric pits. The pits are where all of those, and we'll look at the anatomy of the pit, where the pepsinogen is made, where the hydrochloric acid is made. This has a lot to do with reflux with regard to the valve. Again, that's more anatomical. If it's physiological, it has what to do with, and there's certain things that are part of it. Obesity, pregnancy can certainly impact it. I've seen babies with it. They had to do surgery on. Okay. You have certain types of exercise. I think the most common ones are more food related stuff. I mean, most people, I'm excessive amounts of alcohol. Some people really love spicy food, but it takes its toll over time. I go through a time like that. And it's like I'll do the blands after this. It's very upsetting. So much sriracha, so little time. Would you like that stuff, sriracha?
I don't know that I've ever had it like on its own, so that I could actually taste. Like, I like hot sauce though. I do like spicy things.
So if I'm going Asian, I use sriracha. If I'm going, I don't want to be politically incorrect, Tex-Mex type of set, Mexican, that kind of Cholula. It's in a little bit. You see it every grocery store. If you go, like where my son is in San Diego now, for school down at the Navy, ketchup, mustard, Cholula. I mean, it's on every place like that. That's the hot sauce of choice. So good. So moving on. This is physiology I do not do. These different phases of what happens. I'm not that interested. I really, I'm not that curious, so to speak. In the stomach is really a mixing bag. The eventual, because I might have questions that utilize terminology, to be aware of what happens. Your food, by the time it exits your stomach, is called chyme, C-H-Y-M-E, as you can see here. The way they do it, and basically, it's a white, pasty, hypertonic, hyperacidic mush because of all the hydrochloric acid that is in the stomach that's squirted out in like half teaspoonfuls, a couple of milliliters into the small, beg your pardon, the small intestine. And again, the stomach is an acidic environment. The small intestine is an alkaline environment. The physiology is all about pH. So as we move on, without getting into the anatomy, things like that with regard to the curvatures of the omentum or the autonomic fibers, and all of those type of things that are there. The first bit that's very physiological is this. So the mucus is basically very alkaline in nature. And because the lining cells in the stomach have a lot of tight junctions, it forms a very significant barrier. And that barrier does not allow that acidic solution to penetrate. Certain things activate. This is where things are ulcerogenic. Anything that is absorbed through the stomach, and it's limited. Aspirin and other non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, certain medications, alcohol, caffeine, they all absorb to a certain extent or a large extent, like the non-steroidal inflammatory drugs and alcohol, into the stomach. By definition, that means they're passing through that barrier, and they weaken the barrier. So those are like, if you have ulcer disease, those are the first things the doctor will tell you. I've listened to them. You can't have alcohol. I never drank anyway, so who cares? Okay. Cigarette smoking, well, that was a different story. Stress. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, that's Motrin, ibuprofen, naproxen, whatever. They're all basically the same. I ate them like candy. I had constant headaches. Who I was married to was she had the same headaches. I was the source of those. So, I mean, I told Dr. Hillard this. You know how moms cry at weddings because they're so happy? My mom cried for a different reason. Didn't I tell you that? I did. You've heard me speak of my father. Every memory of him is a treasure for this wonderful man. I get teary thinking about it. I never failed to follow his advice except once. We were getting close. It was probably a few months before when we were making ideas and we were going to go practice and all in the business acumen and all that stuff. He goes, we're sitting in the car. I forget where we went. Looking at equipment or an X-ray unit. Lou, just want to tell you, it's your choice, but I wouldn't marry her. It's up to you. I'm telling you this. If your dad comes to you and tells you that, if there was any of you wonderful girls in here, he would have been absolutely ecstatic. Absolutely true. These are the pits, gastric pits. Remember, they're anatomically, these mucous neck cells don't know what they do. The big ones are the parietal cells. Two things physiologically. They make hydrochloric acid. This is one of those areas where we have that interesting exchange. We saw it a little bit in respiratory where we had the alkaline tide, the negative bicarbonate, and the alkaline tide digestively had a lot to do with exchanging chloride respiratorily. This is an area where it kind of gets swapped out the other way. The bicarbonate from that carbonic acid buffering system is swapped out for chloride. So it's pretty interesting. That goes on. We'll look at the physiology as we get down the road with that. So the parietal cells make that, and they make intrinsic factor. That's the chemical that facilitates or enables us, a better word, to absorb vitamin B12, which normally we would only get through our diet. Now we can get it by injection or nasal gels or nasal sprays, but for the longest time, B12 and people who couldn't absorb the B12 for whatever reason either didn't make the intrinsic factor. And you remember we talked about blood, the anemia was called pernicious anemia. That's an anemia because B12 helps red blood cells mature along with folic acid, that we call a macrocytic anemia. Remember, when red blood cells mature, they get smaller. Without the B12 or the folic acid, they stay large. So it's macrocytic. It's still an anemia because there's insufficient amount of hemoglobin to fill that large cell. So here you are. Mucous neck cells not clear. Parietal cells, hydrochloric acid denatures the protein. You all know that. pH activates the pepsin. I showed you before. Cell walls from plants, cellulose. I mean, I know I was bad about doing it before. There's really a lot of good. When my son, I was talking to him yesterday because it's a 3-hour time difference. He goes, "Oh, I just ran into the whatever the snack area was in the hotel." He goes, "I just ordered a big salad for lunch." I'm like, "Really? Are you feeling all right? No burger and beer? Maybe a shot of bourbon?" He goes, "No. I've been reading. I have to see more stuff." We tend to not be included. Eat enough vegetables. Really have played a valuable role in digestion because of the fiber, because of their ability to not just provide bulk digestively, but also to absorb, not AB, but ADSORB, to absorb a variety, whether they are toxins, whether they are cholesterol precursors, to allow us to excrete them. So, I mean, a lot of you are in sport, and your diets are probably pretty good. Just, it's try to eat more of that good stuff. So here's the pepsinogen coming from the chief cells. It's activated by the pepsin, the hydrochloric acid, and even has a positive feedback loop. And here's the lipase, comes from the chief cells. So all of that, you can see where I've written that down. So we've got 2 enzymes working on fats, just one so far working on proteins, and just one from our mouth working on carbs. And nothing else is going to happen for a while. And again, the tight junctions, bicarbonate-rich mucus, all these adaptations, the cells are clobbered by chemicals throughout the stomach, small and large intestine. They're replaced very rapidly, the most rapidly in the small intestine. You should remember that. They call the crypts of Lieberkühn. These are gastric pits. The small intestine has crypts, CRYPTS, a la crypt associated like a cemetery or something like that. Sounds like a bad horror movie. Horror movies? You know, it's horror. This is Pittsburgh. This is where the whole horror movie central. Very big here. Night of the Living Dead, a cult classic, was filmed in a cemetery just this other side of Zaley, between Zaley and Evans City. No? Cheap to film for George Romero. My stepkids used to go there like on Halloween night, like at midnight. They were fun going around. My daughter's like that also. It's like a ghost hunter. Oh, we might see a ghost. It's okay. So here's again the problems. Anything that breaches it, irritates it. You can see the Helicobacter pylori. Ignore that. I'm not going to ask you about it because it's wrong. Okay, but again, I think the big culprit to me is stress and nonsteroidals and alcohol and smoking are all things. I had a dozen of those. That's awesome. That's the Helicobacter pylori. I think that would be a poor question to ask anybody. Again, if they talked about its relationship to stomach cancer, I could buy that it has a strong relationship to that. And you can go through this as easily as I can. Nothing special here. Here's the pernicious anemia nugget. Again, I'm not going into the regulation of all of these things or the different phases I don't like to do. So this is mostly review, but this is a very nice summary, so to speak. pardon me, about what is produced there. And so we're going to get to that in a second. The big players that I would be familiar with, if we go back and look at these, sorry, I buzzed right by it, down here, these enteroendocrine cells. Endocrine means directly into the bloodstream. This is a unique thing we see in the stomach and in the small intestine. Here, the stomach makes a couple of things that activate the mechanisms. These enteroendocrine cells release acetylcholine, they release histamine, which activate gastrointestinal, which really increase stomach motility rather, stomach movement, and increase stomach secretions. And by far and away, the most important is called gastrin. And so they used to be called, that's why they used to be called G cells, because they made gastrin. And gastrin is the same thing. It's like an autoendocrine. These are autoendocrines and paracrines, meaning they're produced by the same cells that they work on. So when food enters, it's that stress receptors trigger these. And they produce, that's why if someone has, you might recall me telling you about that, we take a special antihistamine, one that wouldn't work on your allergies, like a Zyrtec would. But something like a Zantac works by a different mechanism. It's called a histamine 2 blocker. So it's antihistamine for H2 receptors. Gastrin, very powerful agent. Acetylcholine we're already familiar with. This is released by the vagus and stimulates as well. So they should be maybe a little bit familiar with those as I buzz through it. And again, I don't like to do the phases and things like that. We'll get back to the chart. You'll see that as food begins to enter the small intestine, that even that tiny little squirt, half a teaspoon, 3 to 5 milliliters, is enough to trigger, because it's so acidic, so hyperosmotic, and there are stretch receptors. It's really not a big opening. What that does, that combination releases the next set of these sort of, for lack of a better term, autocrines, or I think maybe it's a poor term, that endocrine hormones from the lining cells, that in a similar lining cell, it releases secretin, which stimulates pancreas, and cholecystokinin. Cholecysto means gallbladder, kinin means activated. And what that does, secretin gets the pancreas busy secreting all the digestive, quote unquote, juices. Bicarbonate to neutralize the acid, a lot of water, all those zymogens, and you'll see when we get to them, there's a ton. Because you'll have to be familiar with the different names that are there. It's fairly straightforward. And the cholecystokinin basically squeezes the gallbladder, if the gallbladder is present. If not, it at least stimulates the liver to release bile. Because effectively, when something's exiting your stomach, the message is going to your liver going, well, we've got incoming food here from the stomach. We have to start to produce what to digest it. Whether it's fats, we're going to deal with the bile. If it's anything else, we're going to deal with the pancreas. It's a neat messaging system that all works locally. Here's what I was telling you about, the alkaline tide. The parietal cells pump hydrogen. Carbonic acid, that's where they get the hydrogen, that wonderful action. As it's pumped into the stomach lumen, the bicarbonate is exported back to the blood via chloride and bicarbonate antiporters. What resultant is that the increase in bicarbonate in blood leaving the stomach, because the chloride's leaving the blood, the bicarbonate is coming into the blood, is called the alkaline tide. The chloride being pumped out makes the hydrochloric acid, and this alkaline tide, and you'll see as the blood makes its way back finally to the lungs, we kind of reverse that. So they're showing it to you here. Oops. So you can you can follow the way the prompts go here. Here's the very famous carbonic acid buffer reaction. I know you're already familiar with. And you can see the chloride going out into the lumen, and at the same time, the bicarbonate effectively going out into the bloodstream. So we're bringing chloride in from the interstitial fluid and basically sort of neutralizing the effect of the bicarbonate, even though some of it's going out to make hydrochloric acid. And I mean, these are the accommodations. The stomach can relax. It stretches, it relaxes more. Your stomach at rest, you might recall, is only a couple of ounces. You can fill to a gallon. Even my stomach cut in half twice, quarter of my original stomach. I mean, I can't eat a great deal, but once it empties, I can eat meals frequently and choose to. Not a smile in the bunch. Okay. The big deal with the liver, without going into it, is bile. Bile is a combination of waste products produced by the liver. It has breakdown products of heme, from hemoglobin, that you're going to see. We have that stercobilin and bilirubin. Those are what eventually it's going to do in the gut. It's going to color feces, and we're going to get rid of a waste product we have a hard time dealing with the breakdown product of the heme. Everything else we can recycle. The gallbladder is just a storage sac. The pancreas kind of does all the rest, with the vast majority of the enzymes needed not to break down the chyme, as well as bicarbonate, which is really important because it's so acidic. We were talking about pHs of 1 to 2 leaving the stomach. I mean, that if you got that on your fingers in chem lab, it would be unpleasant, to say the least. And so that's really, and you might recall when we looked at the anatomy. Oops, sorry. As we look through this, it's all about this triad. And you might recall seeing this. You have blue there, that's the hepatic portal vein, or venule, or capillary network, coming in this, and I use the term percolate through all these mounds of identical hepatocytes, liver cells, all busy processing, detoxifying, making stuff, breaking down stuff, redistributing stuff. They're not going crazy over it. The hepatic artery branching to supply those cells with energy, and they use a lot. And at the same time, they're secreting these waste products, particularly bilirubin, that eventually will either color urine or feces as urobilinogen or stercobilin, are the names that you will see. And it's collected here by these tiny bile ducts that eventually either get stored in the gallbladder temporarily. It's kind of like an overflow tank for like your antifreeze in your vehicle. And so we use it when we need it, or even in its absence, it can go directly in. The gallbladder is extra spare parts. So all of what and so these are, and there's so much that it does. Bile being produced, storing glucose as glycogen, making plasma proteins, storing, and because it's basically fat, so it stores fat soluble vitamins, performs detoxification. I mean, so if you look at it, it's sort of a culinary, and I don't like the fact that the way they make it, but it's like fat foie gras. Just they fatten geese intentionally just for their liver. It's kind of a disgusting thing. And ducks also, which is just, my wife had a pet duck. We don't eat duck. I might, but she wouldn't. Oh, you guys are fun. So all of this combination of, basically it's a fat. Think of what we do when we want to break down a fat. When we take soap, washing our hands, it helps to break it down because effectively it's a kind of biosalt. It's a bipolar molecule that'll bond to the grease or the grime, and the polar part will be washed off by water, enhanced by the mechanical action. So these are all derivative from cholesterol, so they help to break down fats. The bilirubin is there, and this interesting part, this is the circulatory part. About 95% of those fats are recycled as they work their way through digestion. I'm just about done. And when they come back around, okay, we reabsorb them. And that's originally they used to do, it's basically maximizing the uses of recycling cholesterol. Originally when they had cholesterol medicines, when people had too much, they would try to tamper with this mechanism, bad side effects. It works differently, it's my understanding now, without going into the pharmacology of it. So we'll stop here and we'll look at some of the problems with the liver, etc., a little bit with gallstones, but really the bulk of what we're going to talk about are these when we get to the pancreas. These proteolytic enzymes, different parts where they're activated, etc. Thank you. Like I said, so we'll see you Friday. If you're listening virtually, we will not be on site Friday. I will pre-record this and send it to you.